So one of the key parts in everything I've been talking about so far in terms of internal and external scans and capabilities and what we're able to do and resource availability and so forth is the ability to access information and accessing information about capability and so forth. Our greatest tool for that is consultation. So I just want to talk a little bit about consultation with our stakeholders and the importance that plays. So consultation with key stakeholders will help us to get access to information. It helps us to understand what the landscape is like that we're working in. So talking to people who are actually going to be doing the job when we're planning will give us an idea of our capability, whether they feel they can do it or have the capacity to do it, what type of training that we need, if there are gaps, how can we go about doing that training. The people doing the job are often in the best position to provide this information. This feeds up. It doesn't mean that we have to take everything that we're being told, but it helps us, keeps us informed when we make our decisions as managers. The byproduct of that, of course, is that we then get buy-in and engagement from these people. So the people we consult with, if if their voice is permeating through what we're doing, such as planning, that's going to increase their engagement. It's going to increase their buy-in because they'll see parts of their ideas embedded within the plans, and it'll increase their commitment to achieving those goals because they've been part of that process. They feel connected to what goals we've set and so forth. So consultation when planning is critical. It's critical that we consult with key stakeholders. Those stakeholders can be internal stakeholders, such as our teams, can be external stakeholders, such as investors or suppliers, clients, consultants. There's a range of different stakeholders who we can bring into the discussion and definitely consult with through the planning process. And when we think about stakeholders, we can generally classify our stakeholders by their level of influence and their level of interest. So, somebody who has a low level of interest in what we're doing, what we're endeavoring to do with our plans and goals, and also have a low level of influence in what's going on, from a stakeholder engagement perspective, we really need to just maybe just keep them informed at a low level. So minimal effort. They would be classified in this diagram on the right hand side as group A of group A stakeholders, which have low influence, low interest, and as a result, they need little engagement. They're not so connected with what we're doing and really have very little power of influence over what we're doing. So therefore, we may from a engagement strategy or a communication strategy, we may only just need to just keep them minimally informed. But that is different to how we treat someone who has a high level of interest and a low level of influence. So they might be really interested in what we're doing, but not have the ability to influence or have much direct power over what we're doing. We would need to keep those people informed as well, but the level of information that we're going to share may need to be greater than the group A. So that's group B, people who are low influence but high interest. And then we can start to get down into the high influence part of the scale and think about stakeholders who have a low level of interest. So they've probably got a fair bit of stuff going on, and what we're doing is on their radar, but it's not a very big blip on their radar. But in terms of their level of influence, they have an extremely high or high level of influence, meaning that they can influence what we're doing or have direct power over what we're doing. And this dimension of stakeholder we would classify as Group C. We keep them satisfied. We need to make sure that we keep the finger on the pulse with them, making sure that we're finding out what's the level of information they require, how much uh, input do they want to provide into what we're doing, and making sure that we're responding accordingly because they have that high level of influence. It could be someone such as a senior manager or a key investor. They may not necessarily want to be too connected with what we're doing because, as I said, they've probably got multiple things on their radar, and ours is just one of them, and it's perhaps not even a frontline player in their interest, so they're low level of interest. But because of that high level of influence, we want to make sure that we keep them satisfied. So it's often about going to them, finding out what information they require, finding out what input they want to have, and then responding accordingly, especially when we're talking about communication and consultation plans. And then the final group, our group D, they're stakeholders who have a high level of influence. So again, coming with that direct power, maybe again someone in a senior position or someone with authority within the organization or outside the organization, such as an investor, but also have a high level of interest. So what we're doing is is a big blip on their radar. So it's something that they're very interested in, and and it's perhaps even a priority for them as well as it is for us. And um, we would describe these stakeholders as key players. Now, some of those might be within our team, some of those might be outside of our team, so they might be internal within the organization. Let's just say we're talking in a project context, they might be key project players, maybe project team members, other project managers, might be people like sponsors, or it can be, as I said, outside the organization, investors, consultants, could be, in some cases, it might even be regulatory bodies and so forth. So in that case, they're a key player. We really need to be switched on about keeping them informed and switched on about getting their input and making sure that feeds into what we're doing, like our plans and so forth. So we've identified our stakeholders. We know what level of information and consultation we need to have with these stakeholders. So now we start thinking about what are the different techniques that we can use in terms of consulting with them, understanding that as we're starting to develop these operational plans, we really need all these different voices feeding into them. Um, Identifying who are the key players, who are those who have a high level of influence and a high level of interest, who are those who have a high level of influence but a low level of interest, and making sure that those voices are permeating through what we do because they're important to what we're doing. But also thinking about those who have a high level of interest but a low level of influence, and making sure that we're perhaps not so much in the consultation phase, but definitely in the information sharing phase, so the communication phase. So in terms of consultation techniques, there's a number of ways that we can go about this. Things like group team meetings, where we get those key stakeholders together, and they can be done virtually over some of the technology that we're all very familiar with now, or it can be done face to face if it's safe to do so. Things like one-on-one discussions, even if we talk about the virtual space, even things like online information sessions. So maybe not necessarily a meeting per se, but maybe an information event where you can get key stakeholders and invite them to an information session. And also opportunity to have these feedback events where you can gather feedback from people. So again, not so much a meeting where you might have an agenda, but where an online event where you can solicit information. Another common way is through emails, whether they be individual emails or group emails. And of course, some of the more traditional approaches, such as surveys and questionnaires, again, they can be done traditionally via paper through the mail, can be done electronically via email, it can be done electronically through survey websites. We've got focus groups as well, focus groups where we get a cross section of our key stakeholders, a lot more conversational, more qualitative in terms of the information that we gather, to give us an idea of different perspectives of our stakeholders, in terms of things that they're concerned about, or things that contributions they want to make. And comment walls. Comment walls can be done physically, where you might have a space, and it might be a whiteboard or um, some type of message board that people can pin up notes to or write comments on, or they can also be done virtually, where you may have something like a message board or something virtual comment board where people can leave comments about the enterprise or um, the goal or objective that you're working on. And this is all in the context of operational planning as we start talking about developing these plans and getting feedback and getting people's ideas on how we can go about that. These are some of the techniques that we can utilize when we start thinking about all these different stakeholders that we have and how they want to communicate and how we can source that information of them and then how we can feed that information back to them.